Hey, Decathlon Gamer, welcome back to F1 Manager 23, episode 42. Last time out, you might remember that we had our first stroke of good luck, or bad luck, depends on how you look at it. We successfully nerfed the second car, Sargent, finishing near the back of the car grid. He was able to complete the race, but because of a wreck, he took on some pretty serious damage. Chassis and suspension destroyed. Underfloor was fine. That was the one I figured would have been in trouble. But more importantly, though, the powertrain was strongly affected. The good news was it was still the original components. We were going to go at least that one race longer before we switched to the new stuff. And it's a good thing we did, because otherwise it would have been brand new and badly hurt. Now, comparing with car number one, you can kind of get a sense of how much damage we took on. So the engine, minimum 10%, probably 15% taken there. The ERS took 20% damage. Gearbox took 30%. That's pretty big. 30% damage to the gearbox, and it's pretty wasted now. Definitely practice components from here on out for that set. Meanwhile, for Florsch, you could just about get away with another race with that set. Last couple episodes, I've been debating what to do with Sargent in regards to how strong he is, how many points he's scoring, and how far up the grid that's going to put us. And of course, that being an issue. Now, we've already done a couple things to address that situation and help nerf him a bit. But it still didn't feel like that alone would have been enough, and that we might have been forced into bringing on a new driver to close the gap. But thanks to the comments section, something I hadn't thought of, makes perfect sense, and actually would be really helpful. In the comment section, Zozo, TF9ry, thank you. Thank you so much for this suggestion. Why not put older parts on? Give the upgraded parts to Florsch. Make the weaker components, the more used components, for Sargent. That helps us in two ways. One, it gives Sargent a somewhat slower car, which means he's going to finish a few positions down where he would be otherwise, and we score less points, while keeping the board happy, while being successful, while giving Florsch a faster car that's going to allow her to start closing that gap a little bit between the two drivers. Not finish ahead of them, but certainly get us in the direction of having a smaller gap. That part's wonderful. Almost more importantly, besides the successfully nerfing Sargent, the other thing that does for us is it saves a boatload of cash. You're running two separate sets of parts. Red Bull does this in real life all the freaking time. Everything new goes for Verstappen, and somebody else has to drive a inferior car, and then they go and look at the head-to-head and go, well, this guy's winning and this guy's finishing 7th. He's such a terrible driver. I don't think Perez is a good driver, actually, but that point is moot when he's driving a boat in comparison. He's not driving the upgraded parts. He's driving the old parts that others have caught up a bit on. He should still be getting second or third. But when the car is just straight up slower, when you can look at car comparisons and see that they're running different wings, that they're running different floors. We've seen every visible aerodynamic component over the last couple of years. We've seen frequently that they're driving something different. Pretty regular basis. Well, anyway, that's a good way to do it. That's a great way to do it. That's a great way to save money, which then goes into the investments of, one, upgrading the car, but two, in continually improving the facility side of it. Because you got to get those facilities to the top to compete at the top. We've got to be able to make the upgrades count. And that's one thing that's been hard for us. It's been frequency that has really helped get us where we are right now. But quality just isn't there because the facilities aren't. up to that level. We got 25 million right now, so we're going to be able to make another upgrade here pretty soon, maybe one more race weekend. Already we're looking at just 3 chassis. Oh, and then there's 4 old ones. Huh, it's a little bit slower in the corners. Oh, it's got a little bit more weight to it. But, man oh man, it saves us money. We don't have to produce extra chassis. We've got an old one to use. We upgrade to the next one, we just throw him on that one.
Once again, we touch down in Miami as F1 returns to the Magic City. We're in the state of year-round summer. The streets of Miami Gardens will come alive with the roar of racing, and the excitement is only just beginning. 57 laps await our competitors here in Miami, so may the best driver win. This could be an important race today for Lance Stroll.
We're not used to seeing them starting in 9th, but I wouldn't be writing them off just yet.
But just what will happen here, your guess is as good as mine. And this is it, the Miami Grand Prix. And it's lights out, and away we go.
With just 2 weakened components, and others maybe having upgrades, we already find ourselves dropping to a start position of 7th, a couple spots lower than what we're used to. And this is right where I want to be, competing at the tail end of the points, right? Outside of the top 5, but in the points. Able to, have a comfortable season, do something. Florsh, meanwhile, she was 20th. She did qualify last, but barely. She was right there in the mix. She's like a 10th of a second away from 14th, 15th. So that combination will ultimately, get us where we need to be. She's going to start being able to compete in the back of the grid regularly. Not necessarily for points yet, but compete regularly. And as we keep Sargent's car somewhat balanced and towards the tail end of the points, it's going to make life pretty easy for a while, and we can focus more and more on Florsh and bringing her up the grid. Also, helping things out is we've got this new crew chief, and things aren't balanced, so it hurts confidence for Sargent throughout the race weekend. But also, Tanaka, now reserve driver, getting that FP1 session hurts the track acclimatization for Sargent, and therefore Sargent struggles a little bit in that one. So multiple regards that just back Sargent off a little bit, keeps him away from the podium positions, keeps him away from the top end of the grid, and we're going to start backing off here as we come up on the end of lap number 2, settling in 4 kilograms. That's going to be a lot to recover. But we're going to take things pretty quickly these days, as we know we can compete for points fairly easily. I don't want to get too many points, so we don't want to be too hands-on anyway. And Florsh, while she's still very much at the back, even if she's right off Albon, she's still very much at the back. So each one of them, one more position or 2 more positions, aren't going to help that much. So we're going to go pretty quickly through a couple races today. Florsh eventually does get around Albon, and it's still just off the back of Maloney, Gio, DeVries, and Zhou. That whole group from 15th on down is very much locked in together. Field spread, not big. Sargent has finally made it around Porsche Russell behind us, but a little back and forth action that puts us in 6th or 7th. Fuel recovery is happening, but not very fast. We've done 10 laps. That means we've done, 6, 7, 8 laps, 7 to 8 laps of recovery. We've recovered about 3/10. Yeah, we need 4 kilograms. That would take 80 laps to get that roughly, and we only had 55 after the push laps, the 2 push laps. So 55 to recover it, and it would take 80 laps to do it. So we are definitely short by a fair bit. Florsh going for the soft, medium, soft. It is a 2-stopper for her. She is making forward progress on those softs, up to 17th now. and her window is open. She's a little bit down on where you'd want her to be at this point. I'm guessing that's the traffic and the heat, and but if we go a little more aggressive, she could try to make that forward progress. Joe looks like he's already pit. Albin's off the back. That field spread is starting to happen now here on lap 16. Now the two stopper is supposed to be faster, good 5 seconds faster. The problem with the strategy is that Sargent, who made Q3, where Flourish, who was out in Q1, doesn't have 2 sets of softs available, and therefore we're going for the medium to hard one stopper with Sargent, and Flourish has made forward progress to P15. Only one of the cars behind her pit while ahead of her, so she has overtaken cars, which is great. Again, we are going to need some fuel recovery at some point, and with a full extra stop for Flourish, I'm not sure how much faster she's actually going to be, but brand new mediums, brand new softs versus Sargent, who's going to be on those hards. It will make a difference later on. Good first stop, 2.584, not terribly fast, but certainly not terribly slow either. We'd hope to get into the 2.4 range. Not in last. Not in last after the pit stop. Maloney, 6.5 seconds down, though Zhou, who pit pretty early, is a ways ahead of us. Gio also pit pretty early onto the softs for now. Potas, Sonoda both pitting now, but they'll come out ahead of us. And we're going to move on to the next phase. Sargent enters pit road from P3. There's still cars around us that have not pit yet. This is going to give us a chance to get a slight undercut going, but others have a chance to have undercut us by a bit. But a lot of cars are not going to be going for the one stopper, so that's going to make a difference. We come back out in P9 just behind Gasly. Gasly, one of those cars who have successfully undercut us at this point. Russell has undercut us. Both of those guys were behind us before the pit stop. But one of the big tests will be how many of these cars are actually going to try to now make a one-stopper work versus the guys that are going to be pitting again and losing all sorts of time, as Sainz and Perez pitting just a single lap later. Coming around towards the start-finish line. They are moving again already. Will we undercut them? No. We're going to come out just behind Perez, who we went in just behind. Tires take a little bit to heat up, and therefore we are challenging Perez, but not able to get around him. Flourish, meanwhile, is P17. It's lap 30. We're still at 3 kilograms. That's taken us 28 laps to save 1 kilogram, which is worse than what I thought it was. I thought it was taking about 20 laps to do that. So we're going to have some work to do in the next 27 laps to recover some fuel, but we want to save it towards the end. Right now we're light and fast. That's going to be important. Let's check in on how others are doing in terms of strategy. Leclerc still has yet, or is going to have to pit again. He's already on his second stint, isn't he? Yes, everyone has pit once. Verstappen on the mediums, Norris, Russell, like none of the front six. I think they're all going to end up pitting again. We have a group of 4 right here: Perez, Sainz, Sargent, Pourchaire. That look like they're all going to try to go the distance on a one stopper, as well as Stroll. And then you're looking at a whole rest of the field that's on the two stopper strategy. So Flourish, who's up to P17, that's legit. She's P17. That's good. Failed attempt at an overtake. Sargent backs off and drops to a 1.5 seconds behind, and suddenly find herself under pressure from Pourchaire. That was dumb from Sargent. So good job costing yourself big time race positions later on. Sargent, who initially was slow on the hards, has moved forward. We got around all 3 of the close competitors who were also on the same strategy, got to the front of that group. Leclerc, the first to make his second pit stop, has already made it through. He's already gone through ahead of us, but Sargent sits in a virtual P2 other than the 4 who have yet to pit. Flourish with a spin. Flourish with a spin. She was having such a good race.
Whoa, and there There it goes.
What the heck?
Oh, dearie
Not
me,
even...
You don't want to be doing that.
It's not even a turn. That's a weird one. Okay. We'd already come out of the turn. We had already come out of the acceleration zone. So, tire spin, wheel spin there just doesn't make any sense, but she is going to pit here very soon. How quickly was she able to get going again? She's still 15th. Magnussen went around, but she's still 15th. But it was relatively little, and it's almost fortunate that it was right at the end of the stint, because that spin is going to lead to some obvious tire degradation, additional tire degradation, and she doesn't lose much time off that. She does lose a bit of time on the pit stop, though. 2.635. That is a slow stop, and we come out ahead of De Vries in 19th. So that is the battle for last. But we are done with our pit stops for the day. We're on the softs. And others around us, well, those guys have already pit. They're going to try to go the distance. Everyone around us is going the distance. So that's not good. Bottas, the only one who's definitely going to pit still, but looking at these guys on the mediums, if they're trying to make a one-stopper work, they're going to really be in trouble in the final laps. If they are going to pit again, then it's awfully late in the process for that. So for Florsch, she's been undercut, but those ahead of her, while on the same compound, are definitely going to be slower. Okay, let's check in on the times, as we've got just over 10 laps left to go. 24 seconds down on Verstappen. No threat of catching him if he stays out, but Norris, Russell, Leclerc's not the one we're worried about. It's Russell that we could still get back at. Just 8 seconds behind. I'm not sure about Norris, but we are 3 seconds ahead of Bottas. It's time to start conserving fuel, as we've got 2.5 kilograms to recover. Florsch really needs to do the same thing, and she's down to 20th for now. Florsch is actually gaining on Verstappen. That's her pace, is she's gaining on the race leader. She's overtaken Albon, and this is all while conserving fuel. They've already both recovered 1 kilogram worth of fuel. For Sargent, though, it's keeping his gap at 24 seconds. He's not making any forward progress, but he's on 62% used hards, where others are on very much used mediums, and I think they're going to be on much worse used mediums, but it's going to be hard to make any forward progress. But a 5th place for Sargent, that's good points haul. And almost too good. So it's kind of the extent of where you would want to be. Didn't expect that many cars to try to go a soft medium one-stopper and make that work, but the fuel's nearly recovered, but we're also down to just the last 4 laps. Florsch has made forward progress and is gaining on the front of the field. She's now 18th and 6 seconds. Wait, was she 122 or 124? Either way, she's gaining on Verstappen. It's 66% used softs. I mean, it's not like she's in some sort of lightning situation, but she's made forward progress. She has gotten to 18th. She's beating cars on merit. I love it. Love to see it. 23 seconds for Sargent down, though. Not making that forward progress, but both have now recovered the fuel they needed with just a lap to go. Really cutting it down to the end. It's going to go aggressive to the end. Actually, you know what, Sargent? You're not going forward or backward. Just be comfortable to the end of the race. Florsch is a second and a half behind Maloney, so let's go ahead and be aggressive and push. We'll focus on Florsch and see if she can't get to P17 here on the final lap. She's still got almost 2 laps to go. 3 seconds behind Russell. Could maybe catch and contend, but I don't necessarily want that one more position, the extra points that come with it. So again, Sargent, we're going to, just actually keep conserving. Save that engine for the last lap. But Florsch, we're trying to be a little aggressive here. Here comes the start-finish line. One final time around the track. Verstappen takes the win. Leclerc takes second. Norris is third. Russell will be 4th. Sargent 2 seconds behind in 5th. Good result. Especially when it was looking like for a second there we had gone from 7th to 9th. And we end up 5th. Florsch. Backstretch. Final time. Overtake is on. Up the inside of Maloney. Battery empty,
Low on pack.
but that'll do it. That'll do it. We do make the overtake
Increase
there before the end of the lap, and that's P17 for Flourish. That's a good result. By the way, IRL, Flourish just signed up for another season with her F3 team, so that'll be her second in a row and third overall IRL at the F3 level. It's still the same team. It's still the team that has the slowest car on the grid. So it's hard to do more than finish near the back. But of the 3-car team, I didn't see what the final standings ended up being. But last season, she did seem to outperform her teammates from what I saw at the mid-season or later mid-season point. Sargent is 4th in the drivers, scoring 10 points today. And for us, that bumps us back to 3rd. We only scored 10 points. I have nerfed us. McLaren is coming along. But as other teams struggle, and as we really have this 4-way, there's only 11 points between us in 3rd and Alpine in 7th. Ultimately, we want to be dropping down that grid a little bit more. 10 points is already, that's a lot. That's stretching it. We'd like to do a little bit worse. But we've nerfed him, and I think long term, if we keep it up, we'll be just fine. We'll drop down that grid order. Sargent's 2.447 was 3rd fastest pit stop on the day. Flourish also making the list, helping the team score points when it comes to the fastest pit stop competition, where last season we finished 7th or 8th. So off to a good start this year. Moving on up, definitely getting better, getting faster, and making very, very few mistakes. We made, 1, 2 all last season. If we can keep that up throughout this season and get faster, then life is good when it comes to that part. We've really figured that one out. 3 new design projects on the way. Chassis, underfloor, suspension. We've focused on the aerodynamics for the most part throughout this process. So the suspension, the chassis are well behind. The side pods have been a little bit behind. Side pod has a project that'll be done in 4 days. I'm down to 1 engineer so that I could free up the others to do these projects using all of the hours for the period that just started. So we're down to 3 big projects per period. It's going to help us save some money, be able to commit a bit more to other projects because we've got a good car. Keeping it good, continually developing it is going to, help things. But we also don't have to go crazy anymore because, well, we've got a good car. We're doing what we need to do positionally. We're helping Flourish move up the grid. We can now start taking a little bit more of our resources and committing it towards facility upgrades so that long term we've got a quick car. In the meantime, we had a race. We had just over 25 million. So we picked up our 3.5 million and we just did 3 new projects and yet still find ourselves at 24.7. So we only spent about $500,000. This other project, that'll be done in 4 days. Of course, we'll have to manufacture those side pods, and then that 1 engineer will go to 1 of these projects to help speed it up a little bit. But otherwise, things are looking good and making some good progress in a lot of different areas that it's going to keep the other cars on their heels and keep us on our toes trying to go forward. New month, driver development update, braking +1 for Sargent. That's his only gain. But for Flourish, it's a little bit better than that. Braking +1, but also a +2 on control. Now an 80, her second 80 overall. Meanwhile, for Tanaka, huge gains for her across the board. Cornering +1, braking +1, smoothness +1, and overtaking +1. So the rookie driver picks up 4 attribute points more than anybody else. She should be progressing actually faster than the others, and that's a good sign for us. That could be somebody gaining, especially Tanaka, something in their overall, but you don't see that until later. The thing they haven't been doing this year, I think, is showing you when staff actually develops and we finally see something. Diana Romano is a +1. Big upgrade coming, the Design Center. It's going to add 5 engineers, which is going to allow us to put 5 per project across the board for 3 projects simultaneously. While we have a capacity for 4, but I like doing 3. It kind of makes sense with the hours that we have. But this is an improvement to airflow and drag reduction from 2.4% to 4%, so an extra 1.6 on kind of the standard expertise. That's a healthy bonus. Definitely helps. 18 million is expensive, but we've got 29 million in the bank right now, so that still leaves us with more than 10. And that's usually the mark I try to stay above, is about 10 million, because when you start falling below that, things happen, emergency manufacturing, etc., replacing engines, grid penalties, especially on a sprint weekend, that cost really adds up. So trying to keep kind of a minimum balance of 10 million is a great way to keep yourself from having major issues. But we're getting to that 3rd to 4th stage now, with everything at a 3+, at a couple 4s now.
Welcome along to Italy, and welcome along to Imola. Just outside Bologna in northern Italy, Imola hosts the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, named after the region it sits in. Surrounded by woodland, this iconic track is rich with Formula One history and the legends of those who raced here. Imola has no fewer than 4 chicanes, with the Variantes putting a slow-speed corner into every sector around this historic circuit. It's a high downforce track with sharp turns breaking up the straights.
New components versus old components playing a factor, but Logan Sargent, with everything that we've done to nerf him, did not make Q3, qualified 11th. Florsch, with a number of brand new components, very different than what Sargent's running. Definitely faster. She's still nearly a second behind Sargent, though, but she has qualified ahead of a few cars.
Here in Imola, the drivers are ready to take on the 63 laps of the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. And there's no doubting that Lance Stroll is prepared to put in the hard work.
To get back from P9 up towards the front, it's going to be a case of executing their strategy well and keeping it clean.
This should certainly be a good one, folks. This is it, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. It's lights out and away we go.
And we're racing. Obviously, I'm getting more and more focused on other things, developing the car, nerfing Sargent in the short term. Florsch, love to see that she's started above last. Different strategies available today, most opting for the same strategy that I have, which is going to be a medium to hard one-stopper. 4 cars going for the softs. It's going to be a difficult one to really make those work. I looked at alternate strategies, and nothing really made sense. It's going to be a fairly comfortable and fairly quick ride. Sargent already up to 10th, and I think can compete for points, but tail end today. So after the first couple of laps, we settled in at P10 and P19. Not the greatest outcome, certainly not necessarily where you want to be, but very little field spread in the early laps. But as time goes on, I'm sure it's going to stretch out as more and more cars lose DRS. Stroll runs wide turn 13 and goes all the way to last place from a top position. He was ahead of us. Now is last. And then Stroll crashed on turn 15 as a result. Follow up to that, he's already by himself. This is already P20. So he lost it a second time, probably from running wide or the lack of confidence, one of those two things. As always, we need to keep an eye on fuel recovery as we went a couple laps under to help with that pace, and you can see how that's paying off as Sargent's up to P7 and closing in on Max Verstappen, who's down in P6 and struggling a little bit. So Ferrari's on top today and pulling away a bit. They've got a quick car for their home race. Florsch, meanwhile, up to P17. She's making some forward progress. Has overtaken one car at least, and Stroll well off the back, nearly a lap down. Looks like Stroll's not going to recover. Porsche was the other car involved. No penalties were given, and I'm totally fine with that. Sargent starting to get in a little bit of a space of his own as he's pulled away a bit from Gasly. Verstappen's a little bit too far ahead of him, and Florsch has overtaken De Vries to get to P16. Fuel recovery happening very slow today, so it looks like we are going to have to lift a coast at some point. Florsch overtaking Maloney, now up to P15. Nice. Gasly, Maloney, both pit. That's the soft compound. Sargent diving off into the pits for his one and only stop of the day. Florsch will be in here fairly soon as well. They're both coming right down on that 30% mark. We've got a problem. 4.724 on Sargent's stop. Enough time for Florsch to come in. We'll see what her stop is. 2.369. And let's see what happened with Sargent. Do we know what it was?
Take their places. And it's in
Left rear.
That moment right there that things go wrong.
It's the Jacks. Well, that's not a good start to a 3 straight race weekend. That's going to add some fatigue to the pit crew, and that's going to impact the next couple of races as well, and the follow-up after that of trying to recover. So we're suddenly looking at a bad month. That was an unnecessary mistake. It's already set Sargent back. He's down to P11 with a lot of cars only pitting 1 lap earlier, but the extra couple seconds and the undercut has definitely knocked him down from an advantageous position to outside of the points. As we come forward, though, Sargent is going to move back up. That's Florsch we were on board with, by the way. So we're back up to P9 now, but yeah, we definitely lost quite a bit of ground there. There's a big gap to Verstappen, and it's Gasly who's gotten ahead of us. So 1 car has overtaken us. Florsch just overtook Pourchaire, who was involved in that incident with Magnussen. He's gone backwards quite a bit. Okay, up to temperature. Let's go ahead and settle in. And lifting and coasting will be necessary at one point, but we're going to have some clean air out there here relatively soon, I believe. So following the pit stops, Sargent has overtaken, has not overtaken. We're P8 after all of that, and Florsch settling in around P15, P16. Doing well. Sargent gets around Gasly up to P7. But we've got that lift and coast situation coming here at some stage. Florsch gets within a second on Albon. That's good. Let's go ahead and start her lift and coast process. Up to P13 for Florsch. This is the highest I think she's ever run. Maloney gets back around her. Let's go ahead and go to conserve for a bit. Sargent is in clean air ahead of Gasly, behind Bottas. Let's go ahead and do our conserve now as well. Florsch, even while lifting and coasting, has overtaken Maloney and is holding him off, pulling away a little bit and closing up on Magnussen. We're nearly a second ahead. Let's see if we can get out of DRS range of Maloney, and we do. Down to 0.7. 0.6. Nearly got the fuel taken care of. Catching up to Magnussen. Dang. How far off from the points now are we? Okay, fuel's good for Florsch. Nearly there for Sargent. Well ahead of Norris in P7. Less than 2 seconds behind Bottas. And then Verstappen just ahead of that. Fuel's good. We have a little bit to make a push with here in the final laps. It's lap 57, by the way. I think I'm happy with Sargent in P7. Bottas got around Verstappen. I'm very happy with that. But at 2.5 seconds down, I think we're just going to ease off to the finish. Florsch, meanwhile, P13 all over the back of Magnussen. Let's focus in on her with
increase pace.
Lap and a half to go. Only 1 DRS zone, and we're coming up on it in a very strong position here. Magnussen already alongside and overtaking E12. Yes. Half a second ahead. Just go ahead. Deploy. Leclerc takes the win. Sainz gets P2. Russell P3. Ferrari looked pretty comfortable today, but not in the end. Sergeant conserving, backing off. We might have been able to contest that P5, P6, but I don't want to. P7, happy with that. 2 seconds ahead of Magnussen. We pulled away quite quickly, quite comfortably. It's not points, but flourish. P freaking 12. Wow. Wow. Now, we're almost running exclusively new parts on Flourish. The last set on Sargent starting to have an impact. Only 5 positions separating them. Only 27 seconds. 27 seconds where it was a second a lap, but it's definitely less than that. It's definitely less than that now. She's a bit closer. Add a half a minute to where Sargent was, and he's definitely higher up the grid and not where we necessarily want him to be. 30 seconds forward. I mean, Sargent would have been, 4th. So I'm happy. I'm very happy. This strategy is working beautifully because we nerf Sargent, drop him down a few positions. He still scores 6 points. That's still a lot. That's still comfortable. That's still going to make the board happy, and that makes me very happy. Meanwhile, Flourish, not far from the points. I didn't even take this race very seriously, and she just scored 12th. We helped her gain 1 position at the end, and that's really all we did. So, fantastic stuff here. Really happy to see it. Sargent, still 4th, still 3rd, even though we only score 6 points, but only 2 ahead of Mercedes. It's just, it keeps trading off who is doing what. We're 12 ahead of Aston Martin, who didn't score today. Keep nerfing it like this. We will not stay 3rd. We'll drop down. Clear top 2, though. We could easily be 3rd, though. We really could easily be 3rd. I mean, we are 3rd, but we could easily be holding that 3rd if we weren't nerfing that, and that would be a real problem for next year. We do need somebody in that chasing pack who are all within 10 points of one another and 12 points of us. We need somebody to step it up. It's inconsistent on who's scoring those points, and I'm consistently just scoring points. But I'm pretty confident we will be overtaken, especially if we continually do just enough to nerf Sargent to be at the tail end of the points. Can we get Flourish into the points this season? Did not see that coming just a couple races ago, but at this point it's looking like it might happen at some point or another. That's going to do it for this episode, though. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Be safe out there, and bye for now.